Hi guys, and welcome to my Finish the Series challenge. In case you missed it, I put out a video called Middle Book Syndrome that talks about my reading biases and at least my excuse for why I don't finish so many series. And I decided to go ahead and take responsibility for that this year, and I made May my month that I went ahead and completed a Finish the Series challenge. What this entailed was for a whole month, I couldn't pick up any new books unless I was progressing further in a series or finishing a series. While being a little apprehensive, I had an amazing time with this challenge, you guys. I highly recommend that you do this with your reading. I really was shocked at how much fun I had this month doing this challenge. I got through so many books. I had an incredible reading month. I got through 16 novels. I'm so impressed with myself, and I really wanted to keep going, but due to my reading schedule and my never-ending TBR, I wasn't able to. But it did kind of bleed over a little bit into the first couple of days of June, and I have no regrets whatsoever. A couple quick statistics here. I finished 16 novels to complete a full 6 series that I have been meaning to complete, and I got further progression with 5 more. Overall, the biggest regret that I have during this whole challenge was that I didn't complete this book, which is The Dark Forest, the second book in the series to the 3-body problem. I have decided to make this my priority TBR book, and it's really the only big negative that I have for the complete Finish the Series challenge. So the series that I've progressed with. The first one is going to be Dune Messiah. Dune has become increasingly popular now that the movies are coming out, and it's an incredible first book. I never continued with the series, and I heard so many of my friends say it got really weird, somebody turns into a god or something, and I thought that the series wasn't for me. I just really enjoyed that first book. I've had some pretty intense conversations with people on Discord and some of my friends saying you have to at least read the second book because you don't really know what this series is about. And it was the shortest in the whole Dune series, but it definitely wasn't anywhere close to as good as the first one. I'm not sure that I understand the series any better after having read the second book than I did having read the first book. I really thought that this book was a little bit akin to an entire novel of Paul coming to terms with what happened in the first book. So it's like an entire reaction book, and I really didn't feel like it progressed the plot a whole terrible amount. It just sort of segued into the next book. If you're thinking about picking up this book, I don't dissuade you. I had an okay time, and it definitely didn't start into any of the weird stuff that I've heard about in this series, but it wasn't a clarifying read, which is sort of what I had gone into looking for. I did decide that I'm gonna go ahead and pick up Children of Dune and see what everyone is talking about. So the next series that I continued is actually the novella series Murderbot. I embarrassingly hadn't got past the 3rd novella. So I went ahead and got done with the 4th novella so that way I can pick up the novel. I love this series. It's so easy to go in and out of. Probably the reason why I stopped it in the first place, because I thought, oh, I could easily come back. I finished this book in a day, and I really enjoy the Murderbot series. I will definitely be continuing with this series over time. I'm gonna need to prioritize it a little bit more. If you don't already know, Murderbot is a human construct AI, which just means it's an AI that looks like a human and is supposed to act like a human and has a lot of social anxiety and doesn't like to be in social situations and deals with this social anxiety by watching soap operas. So what a relatable, incredible, humanistic characteristic. I really enjoyed the second book the most so far. An incredibly easy series to get into and get through. The next one I did was Until the Last of Me by Sylvain Neuvel. This is the second in his alternate history series. If you've been watching me on Instagram, I posted a little bit about this series. The first book is called A History of What Comes Next, which I think is a fantastic title, by the way. What a very clever title system this gentleman has. This series is happening during the space race, and we're following a particular set of family members as they go through an influence time. I don't want to give away too much, but I will say that the second installment in the series was a little bit of a middle book syndrome for me. I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the first one, although it was enough that I will be picking up the third book when that one finally comes out. Next is a audiobook that I do not have a physical book for, and that is called The Ghost Brigades by John Scalzi. This is the second in the Old Man's War series that I have really wanted to continue with for a long time. It's made a lot of critical acclaim, and I really wanted to dig into what the rest of the series was going to continue with. I loved the world and I loved the first character. The second book goes into a completely different character, which was a little disappointing for me. John Scalzi did a really good job of exploring memory in this second book in an opposite way that he did it in the first one, where memory and experiences are really good in the first Old Man's War book. This second book really talks about how these people don't have memories and what does that mean for them. Don't worry, I'm not going to cover any spoilers here. I really enjoyed the second book. I was really surprised with the angle that he took, and I can't wait to pick up the third book in this series. The last book that I just progressed with the series in is actually a fantasy series that I have slowly been making my way through, and that is The Dresden Files. I finished the book Blood Rights. I believe it's book number 6. This one was just a fun read. I've been trying to get in the habit of picking up one of the Dresden File books every single month, have a little bit of a taste all through the year. However, I've been slacking on my Dresden Files reading lately, so I decided that this is the perfect excuse to go ahead and further with that series. If you're not familiar with it, we're following a wizard named Harry Dresden who has made himself a public figure by telling the police that he will consult with them during their murder cases and detective cases, being a consultant / PI. Each book is kind of treated like an episode of a TV series, so it's all contained. Some recurring characters continue throughout the series. I noticed that in the first 3 books, it really didn't matter, at least for me, what order you read the first 3 books in. I hear the series gets a lot more heavy and a lot more interesting a little bit later on in the series, but because I'm still enjoying it and I know what I'm getting into when I open a Dresden Files book, I'm definitely continuing with the series. I think it's a little bit harder for a series like this with episodic installments to have that middle book syndrome, which is one of the reasons why I'm so attracted to this series. Book number 3, which I believe is the one about a ghost, Grave Peril, I believe it is, was my least favorite because I'm a little bit creeped out by some of the ghost type things that appeared in that book. As for the rest of the series, I've really enjoyed it. So that one I do recommend. So the first book series that I have completed is Bearhead by Adrian Tchaikovsky. You know I had to have a Tchaikovsky in this video. This is a duology. It starts with Dogs of War and finishes with Bearhead, and it's a series that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, maybe because it's only a duology, but I gotta tell ya, this book really leveled up this series for me. It was significantly more about the world building, about the politics, about what happened in the first book and what that meant for humanity on a global scale. And at first, I didn't know what to make of this book at the very beginning because it does have a couple of point of view changes, but I really loved this book so much to the point where it definitely made me love this duology more. I really had a good time with it, and I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but I will tell you that if you enjoyed the first book, I think that finishing this book will definitely make you enjoy the series more. I would highly recommend it, and please check the series out. The next duology that I finished is Interference by Sue Burke. This is the second in the Semiosis duology, and this book just continued from where the first book left off. It definitely has quite a few plot points to increase the drama that happened in the first book. There is a third species that is introduced, as is the interference, and this book was very clever. I really enjoyed this duology. I think that it is one of the most underrated duologies that I have had the chance to trip across. I really, really recommend this duology. It's very satisfying in its completion. I think I'm going to go see if I can find other books that Sue Burke has written, because this was a really good one. The next series that I finished was Children of Memory by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is the Children of Time series. I absolutely adore the first book in this series. It is one of the top best science fiction books I've ever read. I really, really, really loved this series. I had such an amazing time with that book, and it could have just hit me at the right time, but I thought he was so innovative and clever. He did something that no one else had ever done, with showing how an entire society develops that is not a human society. It talked about technology and social cues, and I was so in that series. I love that first book, and I was really excited to finish this series. I got sent this book by a subscriber, so shout out to Glenn for sending me this book.
Shout out to his family.
Adrian, he set the bar so high with that first book, Children of Time, that for me, Children of Ruin was definitely a middle book syndrome. It didn't go into that development of a society the way that I wanted it to, and it definitely felt like it was just a bridge book to get to this one. Each individual book in this series goes over a different terraformed planet by humanity. So each of them deal with different creatures. And this book definitely brought all the creatures that we have been talking about in this series up to this point together, and talked about how they would have to work together to make any kind of relationship work. And that was a very interesting approach, I thought. I liked this book, but I gotta say, I didn't love it. And I think, again, this has to do with the fact that I was looking for another Children of Time. I was looking for another society building, another technology, and that's not really what happened in this book. It left me wanting a little bit. I really think that this series suffered a little bit just because of how good that first book was. It was such a high bar, you know? How is he gonna compete with that? It's still a 4-star read for me, but it did drag in the middle. I do know plenty of people who didn't connect with the first book of this series, who really liked the second and the third book. For me, it wasn't there. I'm kind of a big ideas girl, I guess, or something. I really like this series. A little bit of a disappointment for me for right now. We'll see how this ruminates and how I feel in a couple of months. The next series that I finished required 2 books, and that was the trilogy that starts with Nine Fox Gambit. I finished Raven's Stratagem, which is book 2, and Revenant Gun, which is book 3. This series is called Machineries of the Empire, and they're by Yoon-Ha Lee. I loved the first book. I really thought it had a lot of similarities as Memory of Empire, except a little bit more military. I really thought this series constantly one-upped itself. In the first book, we're following a girl named Kel Cheris, who is a soldier who gets a very famous personality of a dead general put in her brain. And he was supposed to be mad. And so she's doing this at her own peril, I would say, because they're desperate to win a war. And in the second book, it really follows and picks up from book 1, and it really gives us a spectacular conclusion to the war and what happened with Kel Cheris and General Jadao. I don't want to go into too many details here, but I thought that this was a satisfactory ending, and I could have ended this book here, or this whole series here, and I was like, but there's a third book, so what could they have possibly done? Oh wait, Yoon-Ha Lee upgraded this story even more. Turns out that there's another copy of General Jadao somewhere in the universe. Don't worry, that's not too much of a spoiler, but this book really picks up on, is the general really going to be a genius if we only have memories from his training days? Or was it his experience that made him such a good general? And this book goes in depth into that question. And I was really blown away by the fact that there's even a third book, and what a cool, clever concept Yoon-Ha Lee did with this series. So, wow. On this series, I really, really liked it. I highly recommend it. All of these books were a 4-star read for me. None of them quite hit that 5-star, but I'm not exactly sure why. What I can tell you is that I enjoyed the ride the whole time, and this series has stayed with me. So it does last the test of time. Definitely check it out if you're in for a military space opera kind of a story. Next are another 2 books to finish out a trilogy. This is a trilogy by Octavia Butler that starts with the book Dawn. And then I finished the second book called Adulthood Rights and the third book called Imago. What's interesting about this series that I kind of wish I had known going into it, in Adulthood Rights we're following a different character in Lilith's world. This character responds to the same struggles as Lilith in a very, very different way. We are kind of advancing through time, so it's kind of the next generation rather than Lilith. Lilith does appear in this novel, but it's kind of at a distance. And then we go and move on to Imago, which again moves a little bit further in time to the next generation and is again another character. So each of these books change main characters, and because of that, these 2 books were not quite as good as the original book of Dawn. I was a little bit sad because I fell in love with Lilith and I really wanted to see the rest of her struggle and the rest of what she had to go through in this world. These books do answer that for the broader question of humanity, but they don't really answer that quite in the detail I wanted for Lilith herself. I do not think that the middle book suffered from middle book syndrome. I was relatively satisfied with the conclusion of Imago, although I do feel like she left it open to write a 4th book should she have wanted to continue and introduce another character. She could have. I gotta tell you, I think that my heart still lies with Dawn. Dawn is still the best of the series, and while I do recommend continuing to read these series, I do recommend all of the deeper themes that she goes into in this series. Dawn was definitely the best of the books, just like Children of Time was the best for that series. A slight disappointment here, but still fantastic 4-star reads, very accessible, very beautiful, spectacular writing. I'm very glad I finished the series, and I can't wait to move on to another Octavia Butler series. Then I got to one of the most proud moments, and that is Isaac Asimov's Foundation and Empire and Second Foundation book series. I absolutely loved Foundation. It really surprised me how accessible and how simple Isaac Asimov writes. Because of that, it definitely stands the test of time. But he's definitely a big ideas guy. He doesn't go a lot into character development. And what I found spectacular about these books is Foundation and Empire was better than Foundation. That's right, I'm gonna repeat this again. Foundation and Empire was better than the first one by a lot. I finished this book and literally almost dropped it. I jumped for joy. It was spectacular. It has a couple of big twists and turns. There's a couple of big main characters in here. It finishes the story on a heck of a zinger. Perfect last line of a book. I see so many similarities between this series and Star Wars, and I gotta tell ya, wow. Like, truly, oh my gosh. I can tell you right now I found one of my favorite books of all time, and it's not the first book of a series, it's the second. And I could not wait to pick up Second Foundation. And I gotta tell you, I loved it. Again, this book was better than the first one by so many leaps and bounds, which I didn't anticipate. And I loved this conclusion to this series. You guys, I loved how simplistic these are and how many cool big ideas Asimov has. And I find I'm discovering so many of these ideas are used over and over in our modern science fiction, which is awesome, but nobody did it like Asimov did it. And I love this trilogy. I think this trilogy is going to be in my top 3 best science fiction trilogies of all time. Hands down, no competition. Despite having some good twists and a good zinger also at the end of this book, Second Foundation, Foundation and Empire is still where it's at. I can't get over the beautiful twist. I can't get over how amazed I was at the end of this book. I just had such a good ride. So, exactly the opposite of a middle book syndrome for me. The best book was definitely the middle book, but 100 times over, you have to continue and read Second Foundation. If you haven't read the series and you like science fiction, you have to consider the Foundation trilogy. Oh my gosh, it's so fantastic. I also, when I completed the series, I stopped what I was doing and I went to the bookstore and I bought the very next book, Foundation's Edge. I am so excited to pick this book up. I am going to read all of the Foundation series. I was blown away. I didn't think I would be able to top that. And then I picked up the 3rd and the 4th books that I've been meaning to get to forever in Dan Simmons' series, The Hyperion Cantos. This is an omnibus edition, so it has Endymion and The Rise of Endymion, which is the 3rd and the 4th books, the final 2 books in the Hyperion Cantos quartet. Wow. You guys, wow. I don't even know where to begin to talk about a review for these 4 books. These books have such an amazing potential to change your life. Especially these last 2 books, I feel like they form a more solid story than did the first 2 books, at least for me. This was my very first read-through of the Endymion and Rise of Endymion. I feel like somehow Dan Simmons repeated all of human history, all our mistakes, all our triumphs, all the beautiful things in life, and then all the negative things in life. He repeated them all, as we are apt to do, but in the future. The themes of this series are endless. I really feel like my life would have been worse if I had not finished the series. And I can also guarantee that every time you reread the series, you're going to get something new and different from it. I see why some people I know read this Hyperion Cantos every year. I totally understand that now. I'm stunned. I'm awestruck. Hands down, this is the best, the #1 best science fiction series of all time. For me, no competition. Don't get me wrong, I love Isaac Asimov, but wow. I realize I'm just stumbling over my words, incredulous over this series. I know a lot of people who hesitated on these 2 books because they feature different characters. This series starts out, the very first page says, if you're reading to find out what happened about the Pilgrims, you're reading this for the wrong reason. And I found that to be a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek commentary. I do believe that this book does give you satisfying answers to what happened to the Pilgrims, but I also don't think that that's why you should read this series. This chunk of a series is way different. I feel like it had a lot of different themes than the other ones. When I had finished the book Endymion, I was thinking and playing around with the opinion and the idea that maybe you could just read Endymion and the Rise of Endymion without having read Hyperion or the Fall of Hyperion. Then I finished Rise of Endymion, and I figured out that is so not true. Absolutely don't do that. Read these in order. I was super wrong with that idea and opinion, but I gotta tell ya, this series, Hyperion Cantos, literally new favorite of all time. I can't talk enough about these books. I may have to do an entire video talking about, in more articulate ways, why I liked the series so much, but in terms of this challenge, this book series is definitely the winner, and wow. This challenge of finishing the series had spectacular ramifications on my life. I absolutely highly recommend going out and trying to finish as many series as you can, especially the ones that you know you're gonna love and you just haven't gotten to. So I hope this video helps to inspire you. I hope you know that progressing in a series is also equally good. And I plan to continue doing this. So until next time, you guys, I hope you finish your series, and I'll talk with you next time.